Welcome to Trifecta Collective, Finding the Root, where we dive deep into understanding and addressing root causes of chronic health issues so you can help and find healing inside and out, now and forever. Let's get started. Hello and welcome to Trifecta Collective, Finding the Root. I am Megan Abbott, owner and founder of the holistic health practice, Trifecta Collective, and welcome to the podcast. Today, I wanted to do almost a continuation of the How to Change Your Life episode that we did several weeks ago now. And I wanted to dive deeper into the nervous system regulation piece, the trauma healing piece, and talk more about this because this really is, I think, one of the most challenging pieces to really work through, and it can really bring up a lot. It can take a lot to really look at yourself and be able to start unraveling the pieces and connecting deeper with yourself, being able to connect deeper with others, and changing. This plays a huge role in our ability to change and be consistent with habits. And really, this is it. This piece is really the piece when it comes to long-term healing. And anytime I've ever personally had a little flare up of any of my kind of chronic health issues, anytime we've kind of seen this with clients, even previous clients who have come to us, it is almost always this one piece that we're really struggling with, or there's something that we're trying to process and having a very challenging time. So I just wanted to walk through I have a variety of topics that I want to touch on and really talk about some stories for myself, some stories about how I have helped clients and how we've helped clients just overall do a lot of this work, because there's so much that you can do on your own. Does take some extra practice and potentially some more discipline. And there's a lot of value in doing this with other people, whether that's with us, with a therapist, any type of kind of, we'll say, healer in general. There's so many different ways to kind of go about this. And most of us are trying to get to the same kind of result. So, I think the first where I'd like to start with this is when we look at this piece, and once again, we're talking about, really how to change your life. The first kind of, yeah, really piece of this whole process, and I think the goal maybe, if we can put a goal on that, although I don't love that, but the first piece is really how do we connect more with ourselves? And not only with ourselves, but really with our identity. And some people may call this your true self, quote unquote true self, who you'd like to be. If you're in more of like the energetic space, you can call this your higher self or highest version of yourself. And that does have a little bit of a different connotation, especially for me, in someone who's in more of the energetic kind of space. But this is really kind of the initial goal of how do we figure out who we are? And if you didn't grow up in a lot of trauma and had a lot of open spaces in your life and had some really like amazing parents, you kind of might be able to skip at least pieces of this step, because a lot of this is our training and our programming and how we were raised. And for those of us, especially women, and I will say this episode is definitely going to be geared more towards women, although there definitely will be some other things that are applicable to other genders here. But when we talk about women in particular, and there's a lot of names and there's a lot of different types of this. The oldest daughter syndrome, where the oldest daughter typically was taking responsibility for younger siblings, and they are typically the one who suppress their own needs. A lot of times parents asked them or expected them, usually it's a underlying expectation, to step up and help, in which case oftentimes, whether on purpose or not, and a lot of times this is not on purpose, by the way, that person then takes on this caregiver role. And we did a whole episode on caregiving, and this very much applies to most eldest daughters that I've ever worked with. And I'll even say, even not, and maybe not necessarily oldest daughter, but for me, I was an only child, in which case, by default, I'm the oldest daughter. And I was put in a parental role at a very, very young age. I was 7 when I started to step into that role, and really by 8 or 9, felt very fully kind of in that role and in that position myself. And so, in which case, I didn't really listen to myself. I didn't know how to listen to myself. And if I'm being honest, I didn't really have that opportunity to be able to listen to myself, because I was always trying to manage the household. And I mean that from a variety of aspects, particularly emotional aspects, wherein it was almost like my emotions did not matter. And really, by the time I got into, 10, 11, 12, this is really kind of where I started feeling this of, I really just started to push down the feelings. And I did not want to feel the things that I was feeling anymore, because I had to manage so many emotions within the house that I was growing up in. And I didn't really have, outside of school, much of a safe place or safe adults, even. And so I was always trying to keep the peace in the house. And so if I needed to be really happy, then I would be really happy in the household to keep the peace. If I needed to be just like quiet and behind the scenes, if I needed to, have to step in and make food, or, whatever it may be, so that I could keep the peace in the house, and avoid as much as I could the yelling, the fighting, being emotionally abused, all that kind of stuff. So I didn't have the opportunity to really learn, okay, what does it feel like to feel, to be able to process, who am I? My whole goal growing up was, how am I going to get out of here? And really, I started on that goal from such a young age, and I became, the quote unquote overachiever, type A personality. I was pretty much, you would probably consider me a perfect student. Growing up, I got almost always straight A's. I did very, very well. And yeah, I was smart for sure. And I worked hard, because I put the pieces together in my brain early on that the only way that I was going to escape this environment was to go to college, to go to a good school, and then be able to find a good job so that I could support myself and never have to go back to that environment. And so I didn't really learn, what do I really like? Who am I? How do I feel? What do I really enjoy? What activities? And some of those choices were also taken away from me very young. When I was young, I loved to dance. I was in dance classes I started pretty young. And by the time I got to middle school, my mom pulled me out of those. And unfortunately, I was able to take PE in high school, and I did dance class instead of a regular type of gym class. And, I was, for my mom wanted me to play the violin. And that's like what she pushed me into. And she's like, you can get scholarships this way, you can do this, and this is going to look very favorable upon your position kind of moving forward. And so this is what you're doing. And yeah, I for sure enjoyed it. And it was not my favorite thing. And I did put a lot of time, a lot of effort into it. And I had some really, really cool opportunities as a result of that. And once again, at the same time, who was I? What did I really enjoy? What hobbies, what things did I like? And I didn't know. And it really was when I started my own healing journey, I didn't know that I didn't know. And it took me a while to figure that out. And it was really coming out of my first larger psychedelic journey experience that this really resurfaced for me. And during that initial journey, while very intense, and there was a lot that happened during that experience. One of the big things that was very challenging for me coming out of that was almost like it felt like my slate was clean, where I came out and it was almost like, okay, well, who do you want to be now? And it was such an overwhelming question for me. I didn't even know. I'm like, I don't even know who I am. I don't know what I like. I don't know what I want to be, what I want to do, and how that looks, how I want my life to look. I don't even know. And very fortunately, I've worked with some amazing, amazing people in the healing space that were able to help guide me through that. And if this sounds like it resonates with you, and you maybe potentially fall into a similar position of you're like, yeah, I'm not totally even sure what I like, who I am. You've just been kind of going through maybe very dissociated from your life, or really following other people's expectations, which is very, very common. The question is, okay, but what do you like? What do you want to do? And one of the first exercises, one of the healers that I was working with at this time to help me integrate this experience told me to take a journal, and I was not a big journal person, but she said, get a journal and just start writing things that you know to be true about you. And just don't put pressure on yourself, just casually start writing this. And as I started with like blaringly obvious things like, okay, I love my dog. I know that I love my dog, and I could for sure say that. I also knew, for me, that one and the other one that I really distinctly remember is I know in my heart I am a good person. I know I want to do well. I know I want to treat people well. I don't want other people to feel like I ever felt growing up. And I felt like that gave me just a really good heart of how I wanted to treat other people and how I wanted to interact with other people. And I'll also say I had a lot of people pleasing tendencies at that point in time still. And it wasn't necessarily a people pleasing thing. It was, I know deep down that I am a good person, that I try my best to treat people with respect, try and hear them out, and things like that. And as I started to go, and I spent several weeks doing this, of just like as things started to come up for me, okay, what is relevant for me? What do I know to be true about myself? And then another piece of this was trying new things and understanding that one, I may not like it. That's also not the goal. The goal is to try things to see if I like them. Gardening was one of them. I started an herb garden shortly after that. I think come spring of that time, I started an herb garden. I was like, I do like this. I enjoy this. I enjoy the fresh herbs. And I started making, little drinks and using those for food and all that kind of stuff. And I enjoyed that. And so I was just trying some new things of like, okay, what do I like? What do I think that I could try that might resonate with me, of things that I might enjoy? And once again, no pressure on myself that if I didn't like them, cool. I never had to do them again. And if I did, great. I can keep doing them. And if I change my mind at any time, cool. That's also okay too. So that was a big piece. I think the other big piece, and this is a big one, especially for a lot of women, a lot of type A personalities here in particular, is what do I feel? What do I feel? How do I feel in certain situations? What is relevant for me right now in this moment? How can I feel more? And I was actually so this has come up for me twice in the last few months. One was I had a session with one of my mentors, and she said to me, and been working with me for many years at this point in time. She says, "You're not good at falling apart." And that really stuck with me. And I know I mentioned that in, I can't remember what episode, but another episode, but that really stuck out with me. And then I was having a conversation with one of our clients just the other day. And, we were talking about connecting with her partner, and being able to connect with her partner and relax and be held by her partner. And one of the things she said to me, and I had asked her to, try a hug for 1 or 2 minutes, try and breathe nice and deep, and try and relax into the hug. And she started crying very, very quickly. And she said to me, I'm going to break down if I do that. And I said, that's kind of the point because she's so afraid to feel. And once again, I have been here too. And this is way more common than you think if you fall into this category of, yeah, what if I fall apart? Yeah, what if you fall apart? What's going to happen? You're going to cry a whole bunch? Okay, well, that's okay. Releasing emotion, releasing cortisol. The releasing cortisol thing is the one I always think about and helps me lean into my crying a little bit more, especially with my history of cortisol issues. And, what's going to happen? You're just going to cry a whole bunch. Well, that's okay. It'll stop eventually. And if you have to cry for like an hour, that's okay too. And I think for me when I think about that, I think the fear is what if I can't put the pieces back together? And that really that comes from a trauma response of I wasn't allowed to fall apart for most of my life. Honestly, if I'm being really honest, like not until probably the last year where it's been consistently safe to be able to do that. But what if I can't put the pieces back together? What if I just fall apart? And, with my long history of anxiety and depression and feeling very alone and feeling like I can't maybe trust other people, maybe I can't depend on other people, how am I going to put myself back together? I'm so good at putting other people back together, but how do I do that for myself? And I have a very strong feeling that a lot of you can probably relate to that feeling. And one of the things about this whole process is you have to feel. If you don't feel, you cannot heal and fully heal and stay healed long term. And that's a big piece of this because if we don't actively feel these feelings, what happens? We push them down. We just keep pushing them down. It's eventually going to make us sick and we're eventually going to have some sort of issues. And so this is a really, this first step of being able to connect with yourself, connect with your emotions, connect with what you enjoy. What do you like? What do you not like? How do you like to be cared for? How do you like to be treated? And this is where there's a lot of tools out there and, pick and choose which ones resonate with you the most. But for me, human design was like a real game changer for me of being able to understand myself a bit more and not be so judgmental on myself. For me, the big thing, I'm a manifesting generator, 6'2", if you're into human design. And, two kind of big things that I have taken from human design to learn more about myself. One, choose a hermit. I need the alone time. And I hermit because I need to recuperate. And I am definitely an introvert, and I would have considered myself an extrovert for a good portion of my life, and I'm absolutely not. I am absolutely an introvert, and I need, not that I don't like people or enjoy people, because I do, and I need the alone time to recoup and to restore my own energy and not being so hard on myself for that and not being, I have friends who are so significantly extroverts and they're always taking walks with people and meeting up with people and getting coffee and they work with people all day. And like for me, I cannot do that. I have set up my work schedule so that I take the bulk of my calls over the course of 3 days. And then I really need like a whole day not to talk to anyone because I need that kind of recuperation time so that I can show up for myself, show up in the other pieces of my life. But I need that time to really rejuvenate myself and recharge myself. And not that I can't talk to anyone. It's just I need to not be talking to people all day long, is really what it is. And my partner is a very different story. I feel very comfortable and safe, and he's a very recharging kind of energy within my space. So it's not like I need to like really, really be alone. I just need to not be talking to people all day long. The other piece that has really resonated with me is I like to bounce around in my tasks. I have always felt like my brain works better doing different things, like sitting down and working at one thing all day on my computer. I've worked office jobs. I wouldn't say corporate environments, but my first internship was in the government. And I was sitting at a desk from 9 to 5 all day long, and things moved really slowly. I would probably have enough work for like maybe 3 to 5 hours every single day, and then I'd be super bored. And I'd like want to be doing different things, and I'd try and I'd ask for additional, like, hey, what else can I do? And I like to be doing different things. I'd like to not just be stuck doing one thing all day, every day. My brain works better doing multiple different types of things. And it's not an ADD, it's not an ADHD kind of thing. I can absolutely focus, and I enjoy focusing on a particular task, not all tasks, certain tasks. And at the same time, I do like to bounce around a little bit. And that is very manifesting generator kind of energy. And once again, not judging myself for that, for wanting to bounce around a little bit, for enjoying so many different things in my life, and especially in my work. And, I do all kind as an entrepreneur, you wear so many hats, which is one of the reasons why I really enjoy being an entrepreneur and having all of those different types of hats. Not that I love every hat, however, I like most of my hats that I get to wear within the business. So, you can use astrology, love language is another pretty powerful one, and understanding how much physical touch for me, physical touch is my primary one. I've got some others that are pretty high here too, but physical touch is the biggest one for me. And understanding that, and understanding how much being held, cuddling, touch, co-regulation with someone who feels safe, and that has often included animals as well, how enjoyable and recharging that is for me. And once again, it's really about tools, and it's just like different ways to understand myself a little bit better. And then trying these things and like, okay, yeah, does this resonate? Okay, cool. It does. Like what, and how do I apply this more? And how do I make sure I can implement this to help me recharge my own battery more consistently? And by the way, this can take a very long time. So it's not about putting pressure on yourself to figure all of this out all at once, because probably that type A personality coming out here again, versus connecting deeper with yourself. So I think that's a really big one. And then kind of like the next piece of this, I really feel like, is being able to connect with others. And it's one thing to trust yourself. And I really do feel like that is the most important first step, is how do we connect with ourselves? How do we connect with ourselves? And I'll even go as far as, can we love ourselves? And I'm going to come back to this piece too, because there's some other things that I would like to discuss around this. But do we love ourselves? And for women, a lot of times the answer is no here, and that stinks. That just stinks that we can't love ourselves. And if we don't love ourselves, how can we allow someone else to really fully trust and love us? And how can we truly love and trust someone else if we don't do that for ourselves? And that is a huge piece. And we are not meant to live in isolation. Human beings are not meant to live in isolation. I would say even more so, women are absolutely not meant to live in isolation. We need connections, we need friends, we need community, we need these things, and not from a superficial or artificial kind of level, but especially as you do this deeper work, you want people who are also trying to be their the most like themselves. You can say like the most authentic version, the most perfect version. I don't really love any of those terms, but like the most real version of you that you can be. And how do you connect with others? And for me, especially as an introvert and a hermit and someone who talks to people all day long, that can be very challenging. And I am a very sensitive, energetic kind of person too, where I can usually tell pretty quickly. Do I resonate with someone? Do I very much connect deeply with them, or do I not? And, I think, especially if you identify as more of an introvert, we all love our extroverted friends who have adopted us and keep an eye on us and initiate a lot of things, because oftentimes we're not the best at that. Not that we shouldn't strive to initiate more and do more of that. And it can be very challenging. And the extroverts can do a usually a much better job at that. It's a little bit easier for them, comes a little bit more naturally. And so finding, a couple extroverted friends to adopt you as an introvert can go a really long way. And also just other people that you really connect with deeply. And for me, I've had several people that I can tell you within minutes of meeting them, sometimes it's within the first minute of meeting them, that I just connect so deeply. And I feel this sense of being able to be myself and not having to put the mask up, not having to put the walls up where it just feels naturally. And you have to meet people to be able to find those people that you really do. And once again, like, your first couple of times doing this, my first many, many, many times doing this, yeah, it didn't work out. And it just like wasn't the right fit for me. Maybe it wasn't the right fit for me at that time. Maybe it wasn't the right fit for that other person at that time. So these are all things to think about where, just because you go out and try something and you don't meet a friend right away or meet a community, doesn't mean you aren't going to find them. It's a matter of you've got to keep trying and putting yourself out there. Otherwise, you're going to remain in that isolation. And there's also certain levels of intimacy that we cannot achieve if we're in these, hyper trauma filled states, fight, flight, freeze kind of states, fawning kind of states where it's very challenging to connect with others. And it's also, if we talk about more significant other romantic kind of relationships, how deep can your relationship really be if you aren't willing to put yourself out there and have a certain level of vulnerability? And once again, I was this person. This is still something that I continue to work on. And I remember a very specific conversation with a woman who, once again, I would consider her a mentor, who said, you can't build relationships without vulnerability. And you're not going to let anyone in unless you're at least a little bit vulnerable yourself. And she used some other different words here too that I can't totally remember, but I definitely felt attacked in that moment. And fortunately, I had been doing enough work at that point in time that I felt attacked in a way that, like, she saw right through me, kind of thing. And I didn't actually feel attacked. I just felt really called out in that moment. And yeah, I mean, she was totally right. And if I think about my previous marriage, I tried, I tried at various levels to be more vulnerable, to do all of these things. And there's a reason we are no longer together. And a big piece of that is that emotional vulnerability kind of piece that I needed, I was craving, that I felt like I was ready for. And unfortunately, the person I was with just wasn't in the place to be able to connect and be vulnerable at the same kind of level. So that's a really big piece of this, is once again, like, connecting with ourselves. Who are we? Where, how can we feel? What do we enjoy? Like, who really are we? Learning how to trust ourselves, and then being able to translate that into our relationships. Once again, whether that's friendships, romantic relationships, family, anything like that, all of that goes such a long way. I think another big piece of all of this is, if we think about retraining our brain and regulating our nervous system. And a little while ago, I felt like there was a huge surge of this, of you're not training, of things on social media saying you're not training your nervous system to handle more trauma or more stress. You're training it to handle joy, to be able to handle peace, to be able to handle happiness. And yeah, I'm really on board with that. And I think that's a big piece of this is, and I think, I know for me, this was very much the reality of happiness, peace, joy did not feel safe. And anytime I did feel like things were going well or my life was in a decent spot, I was always waiting for the other shoe to drop. And like, okay, well, when is something going to go terribly wrong? When am I going to go and have to fight for my life again, fight for financial freedom, fight for a job, fight for a family, fight to keep myself safe, whether that's physically, mentally, emotionally? all of that kind of stuff. And that is deeply ingrained in those of us who have experienced a lot of trauma. And peace cannot feel good. It can feel boring, if I'm being super honest. And if we think about cycles of, and once again, I'm talking really about myself, and I know this is going to translate to a lot of you, but getting into relationships, and once again, across the board, friendships, romantic relationships that were exciting, that did provide a level of potentially unsafe, whether it was actually unsafe, because I did get into one of those, but really just relationships that weren't super safe, but were quite exciting, especially when it came to romantic relationships, a very lustful type of relationships. And for me now, I see this with a lot of our clients, and even some of my personal clients that I've been working with for many years, of wondering what else is out there, and they are potentially in a very safe relationship, and wondering, yeah, but like, what if I found someone who I was like so attracted to, and just felt such a strong connection to, and almost like feeling those animal instincts come out. And we talk through this and talk through why this actually may be a trauma response, and where this may be actually be coming from, because those relationships, from personal experience and from what I've seen in my life and in my work, typically don't work out super well. And usually it's not rooted in trust, in being very grounded in each, the individual people, and then in each other, around openness. It's revolving around the chaos, the drama. And that's a huge trauma response, of craving that and desiring that, and always like wanting to be in that kind of cycle. And while it can be exciting, when you start to retrain your nervous system, for me, the thought of being in that kind of relationship now, just absolutely not. No, thank you. I rather feel safe and at peace and fully trusting of another person. Once again, whether that's friends, family, significant others, and the thought of chaos and drama. None of my friends are drama filled. There's not a lot of drama or gossip that's talked about. It's really rooted in just openness, and not trying to pick fights or do any of that kind of stuff. Kind of go behind people's back or anything like that. Like, no, thank you. No, that is absolutely not of interest anymore. Let's be truthful. Let's be honest. Let's connect on a deeper level. It's also why small talk is super unappealing to many of us who've gone through this process, because it's almost like pointless. Like, if we're not going to connect on a deeper level, kind of what's the point? And you're looking and craving those deeper connected relationships, and that is a very healthy response. And that really comes back to regulating this nervous system here. Another piece of this aspect here too is, do you feel safe doing new things? And I really see this, especially, the weight loss aspect of trying to do all of the shortcuts, and let me do the latest trend. Let me do this, crazy workout at 45. Let's just like throw that one in there. Let me do a crazy diet. Let me do, I'm just going to do the sauna every day, and, whatever it may be. Fasting mimicking diet, all of these things. And why are we doing that? Are we looking for this quick fix because we're afraid to actually dive a little bit deeper? What about trying new things that maybe make us a little uncomfortable? Maybe like some of this trauma healing stuff. Maybe it's taking a deeper look. Maybe it's implementing new habits. Maybe it's, especially like in the business mentorship world, for me, it's putting yourself out there. You're posting on social media, trying something new in your business, putting a new program together, putting, whatever it may be, and putting yourself out there potentially. knowing that you could fail, and failure can be okay. It's perfectly fine. It's how you approach the failure. And for me, failure has always felt like, okay, what can I learn from this? And what maybe do I need to shift or change going into next time? And I think that's really important. And I think if we're stuck, a lot of us, when we're stuck in these very significant trauma patterns, doing new things can feel very unsafe. Meeting new people, potentially facing rejection of some sort, failing in some form or fashion, not being liked the way we would like to be liked. All of these things can play such a big role and can really limit us from trying new things and doing new things. And once again, if we're trying to connect deeper with ourselves, a big piece of that is going to be trying new things. What do you like? What do you want to try? Like, what does all this look like? Knowing that if you don't like it, knowing that if you're not good at it at first, by the way, almost none of us are good at things at first. It takes time and practice and experience to get good at things. The whole 10,000 hour kind of to be an expert in anything. Like, yeah, for sure. It just takes a lot of time, a lot of practice. You're not going to be great at it at first, and that's okay. You're learning, and that is safe. And once again, this goes back to retraining our brains and our bodies to understand, hey, this is safe. This is okay that I failed. It's okay that I didn't get the response that I wanted, that things didn't go exactly perfectly. And once again, type A people, perfectionist people, you are probably going to fall deeper into this category. And once again, I fell deeply into this category as well. And training yourself out of that. And once again, I think this really starts with, how do you feel safe within yourself? And I am going to do an exercise towards in just not too long from now, to walk you through an exercise. And I think I actually mentioned this on the How to Change Your Life episode of, do you feel safe? And I really like this exercise. I think it's really valuable. So I am going to do that at the end here. I think another big piece of this is, life is going to be stressful. There are things, we can call them quote unquote bad things, but, let's really say stressors in life. Things are not going to always go to plan or always be what you would deem as the most ideal situation. And how do we deal with that? And once again, I think the foundation of being rooted in yourself, in your own safety, in your own energy, in your own emotions goes a long way when it comes to this. And, the analogy I typically like to talk about is healing is really about riding the waves. And you're going to have times where you feel really good, feel a lot of joy, a lot of happiness, a lot of peace. Maybe a lot of things are going super well for you. And there are going to be other times where things are real hard. And it's just the nature of life. And once again, when we think about healing and staying healed long term, it's almost like we have to plan for this. And how do we plan for these stressors? And once again, I love my bucket analogy of, how do we make our buckets a little bit bigger or a little bit emptier going into some of these situations? And when you have this practice of connecting with yourself, of connecting to your feelings, of having tools and resources that help you feel safe, you're going to have a lot of capacity to ride these waves, whether it's the highs, the mediums, and or and I won't even call them lows, but lower parts of the waves. And it's really, for me, it's just different pieces of, when we think about transformation. Yeah, transformation can be a lot, and it's not always like a happy-go-lucky and the toxic positivity, sunshine, rainbows. Yeah, things, big things are going to come up for you. Emotions, memories, past traumas, realizations about patterns that you're experiencing, and it's, what do we do with those when they come up, and how do we process them? How do we, once again, continue to connect and feel safe within ourselves to work through this? And being able to ride those waves is a really important and valuable skill. in life. And once again, the first step in being able to ride those waves is how do we connect with ourselves? How do we connect, deeper with all of these things? And unlearning patterns that may be of self-sabotage and maybe that don't super resonate, this goes a really long way. And this is something that's been coming up for me a lot here recently. And I feel like I'm seeing, I don't know. I mean, I've been in this space for a decade and this has always come up. And for some reason, it's really coming up for me over the last several months here of weight loss, of being, once again, especially women, being so obsessed with looking a certain way and appearing a certain way. And for me, it really does feel like by and large, this is such a trauma pattern of, once again, like this perfectionist mentality of, I'm supposed to look a certain way, or I need to starve myself. And, obviously the media plays a huge role in this and everything around, and, you know, uh, Instagram models and TikTok models and, 20-year-olds who are very thin. And, as a 30, 40, 50, 60 plus year old woman, looking at me like, am I supposed to look like that still? It's like, no, we're supposed to age. Our bodies are supposed to change. Our faces are supposed to change. All of these things change. Not that they have to necessarily, doesn't mean we need to be morbidly obese or different things. And our bodies change, and that's okay. And it's really about how are we supporting our bodies and how do we feel within our bodies. And I definitely think there's healthy approaches to weight loss, to body transformation, to fat loss, all of these things. And by and large, I do not see most people coming at it from that kind of place. And once again, I get it. Food was one of the only things I could control growing up. And so that led to eating disorders very, very early on, disordered eating for a long, long, long time. And it's rough. It is really rough. And the over exercising and these crazy expectations we put on ourselves to, at postpartum of, I need to quote unquote get my body back. It's like, you know what your body needs? Your body needs to heal for a while. It just grew an entire human being. And now, you're dealing and caring for a newborn baby. Maybe we need to not be so hard on ourselves and try and look a certain way, but how do we feel within our bodies? And how can we support our bodies in the healing process and nourishing our bodies and fueling our bodies? And once again, I know I've talked about this a lot, but that approach of how do I support my body? How do I fuel my body? That can lead to some really massive transformations, even with mild changes. Once again, I feel the best in my body than I have probably ever. I'm not the skinniest I've ever been. I'm not the strongest I've ever been. And I'm okay with it. And I still nourish my body with good food. Yes, I do have some sugar. Like, no, I don't do gluten because it doesn't make me feel good. Yes, I eat some dairy sometimes in moderation. And I work out a few times a week typically. I try and go on walks. I try and drink enough water. No, I'm not perfect on any of those by any stretch of the imagination. And I feel pretty darn good in my body doing what I'm doing. And I'm not obsessed. I don't restrict. I don't, if I'm hungry, I eat. I'm not counting calories or macros. Yes, I can probably guess where I'm landing most days because I tracked for so long. And if I did want to change my body, and I've had to wrestle with this on a handful of occasions, both on the eating side and the working out side, of what is my intention going into this? And this intention piece, man, I really think about this in just about everything in my life. Like, what is my intention going into this? Is my intention to fuel and feed my body? Is my intention to punish my body, to punish myself because I had a cupcake last night and now I need to go do run for 30 minutes to work off that cupcake. Or, my intention of this walk, is it to lose some weight because I haven't walked all day? Is it to support my body because my hips are really tight because I have been sitting all day and I know my body would feel better going into this walk? Different things like that. Even drinking, for me, I really don't drink anymore. The intention is just, it's not there. It doesn't sound appealing to me. And that doesn't also mean that I don't drink. I had 1.5 glasses of wine in the entirety of last year. I have yet to drink this year. Doesn't mean I won't. And just the intention hasn't been there. And so it's, for me, if I do have the intention of drinking, the last time I drank was to celebrate. And it was to have, a nice glass of wine with my partner at a New Year's Eve celebration and to just enjoy. And that was the whole intention behind it, which I think is a great intention. But if my previous, back in the day when I was drinking pretty heavily, my intention was, how can I numb my body and continue to feel even less? Not a great intention. And a lot of people use a lot of different things going into this. The other piece, I think about, and I hear people make a lot of comments about this too. And once again, I always try and look at myself and where am I coming at from this, of cannabis use. I was never a major cannabis user ever. And I'll tell you right now, I love a gummy before going to bed. It really helps me sleep, helps me relax. I've gotten some really amazing nights of sleep. And my sleep was already like pretty good and like even way better. And the thing is, like, is it a dependency thing? In my eyes, no, it's not. And my intention is to help support my body in relaxing and getting deeper sleep and being able to restore myself and help my body just restore itself overnight, because that feels good. And stress is high, and having that little extra support goes a long way. Will I use them forever? Probably not. And for right now, it's fine, because that is my intention. It's not hey, I'm going to take a gummy, smoke cannabis, and try and numb myself. That is never the intention. It is really, how can I just support my body, and how can I just help my body relax just a little bit more? And does this feel supportive? And how does this make me feel? Can it take a little bit of an edge off if I've had like a really long day and I'm feeling a little extra wired in the evening? Yeah, it just helps kind of bring me down a little bit. And it's not the only thing I do. I have plenty of other great practices in place to help me decompress and, have a pretty solid sleep routine and all that kind of stuff. And that is what feels so very supportive of me at this time. And so once again, I think of, what intention are you going into with working out? Are you trying to feel stronger? Are you trying to help support your body as it gets older? And we know that we are going to lose some muscle mass, some bone density, and maybe you're trying to prevent that. Maybe you saw someone go through osteoporosis, osteopenia, and you don't want to end up like that. Maybe you have some aches and pains, especially if you do sit all day or do a specific type of job. And you're like, I just want my body to feel a little bit better. And so I'm going to work out doing that. Same thing nutritionally. Like, are you eating just because you have to eat because it's a requirement? Are you eating because you're starving and you're trying to continue to starve yourself to try and like starve yourself into weight loss? Are you going in with, hey, this is going to really help nourish my body. This is going to help with digestion. This is going to help give my body the nutrients it needs. This is going to help fuel and build my muscle mass, my bone density. All of that matters. And I would encourage you, especially if you are on a healing journey and or a weight loss journey or body transformation journey, what is your intention going into this? And how can you love yourself and not focus on punishing or having to look a certain way or having to feel a certain way or present yourself a certain way, versus how can you be more yourself? How can you feel even better within yourself? And once again, working out, nutrition, like, those are great ways to do that, and they can go horribly wrong all at the same time. So I want to end the episode with this little exercise. So if you are driving or not in a place to do this, you can certainly listen. If you are in a place to do this, I would encourage you to get in a quiet space, to close your eyes, take a minute here, get comfortable, close your eyes as a starting point, and I'm going to have you put one hand on your heart and one hand on your belly. And we're going to take a few big, deep breaths here. We're going to take a big inhale in through your nose, big exhale out through your mouth. Another big inhale in through your nose, big exhale out through your mouth. And one more time, big inhale in through your nose, and big exhale out through your mouth. And I just want you to become aware of the hands on your body. What does it feel like? Are there any specific sensations that are coming up for you? Does it feel weird to have your hands on your heart and on your belly? Does it feel good? Does it feel relaxing? Do you have any particular emotions coming up? And what do you feel? What is present for you right now? Is there anything in particular that you feel? And that could be maybe you feel sad, maybe you feel at peace, maybe you feel angry, maybe you feel tired, stressed out, lonely. What is present for you at this moment? And I want you to take a moment to tune into your heart in particular, the hand on your heart and in your heart. What does your heart feel like? Does it feel light? Does it feel heavy? Is it beating fast? Beating slow? Can you feel your heartbeat? What do you feel in your heart space right now? And without thinking, just whatever the first answer that comes up for you, do you feel safe in your body? And whatever that initial response was, is the answer for you. Don't try and overthink it. Whatever that initial response, yes or no, that is your answer. And I want you to take one more deep breath in through your nose, out through your mouth. And take a moment to slowly just open your eyes and come back to. And if nothing came up for you, which is not uncommon the first time doing this, or if you're brand new to any of this type of work, it is okay. You are not doing anything wrong. You just need some more practice tuning in. So you can come back and listen to this again. You can do this exercise all by yourself if you want. You can do some meditation work around this. There's a lot of ways to do this. And I promise you, you will get an answer. When the timing is right, when you are connected to yourself enough, you will get an answer. And for the vast majority of people that I work with, now also keep in mind I'm working with people who are struggling with health issues, who we are doing some additional deeper nervous system regulation work, the answer is most commonly no. And so the next kind of piece of this exercise is once we get an answer, particularly if we get a no answer, what does your body need to feel safe? Does it need alone time? Does it need to go outside? Does it need to cuddle up with an animal, to cuddle up with a friend or a partner or a child or a family member? Does it need some alone time, some not alone time. Doesn't need to go to a class, doesn't want to go be around people. Like what do you need to feel safe? And that's really the other piece of this process, is figuring out, and typically this is the harder piece, of what do you need to feel safe, and how do we start to fill that up? And also acknowledge that your answer will probably change as you go. For me, it was a lot of alone time. And so when I started having more alone time, then I started to feel safe in my body. And then at one point, that was not enough. Just the alone time wasn't enough. I needed connection. And I wanted the physical touch. I was craving, my love languages, and to feel loved, and how I wanted to personally feel loved. And how do I get more of that? And what does that really look like for me? And so also keep in mind that as we go through this healing journey, different things will resonate at different times. So, if you like, breath work is like my thing right now, that's the thing that like really moves the needle for me, great. In 6 months from now, it may not. And you may need to switch it up. And once again, this goes back to trying new things. Like what is relevant for you right now? And being okay with that changing and flowing and shifting, once again, because we are grounded within ourselves, and we can learn how to listen to our own selves, to our bodies, to our emotional needs, so that we can continue within our journey. So I'm going to leave it at that. As always, thank you for listening. Like, subscribe, follow if it resonates. 5-star reviews really, really, really mean the world to us. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time.